I know this world is constantly rushing. You've probably got 20 tabs open, a microwave beeping in the background, and at least 3 messages you haven't replied to yet. So, if you're still here, even for a few seconds, I'd really appreciate it. I rewrite this story with the patience of someone who was forgotten, and only now learning how to speak without asking for permission. Maybe you've been the quiet one at the table. Maybe you've felt the sting of being left out, even while smiling in a room full of family. I don't need anything from this, just hope that you will find a very small feeling that you are not alone. If you feel it, leave a very gentle sign, a light touch on the like button. Let me know. Someone is still listening. The toast came right after the tiramisu. We were at the rehearsal dinner, 50-something people in the courtyard of the Ivy Oak Inn, champagne glasses sweating in the July heat, fake laughter bouncing off stone columns, flower arrangements that smelled like debt. My sister Lindsay stood beside her fiancé, beaming in that soft focus way she'd perfected since high school. Our parents flanked her like they were unveiling a museum piece. Then Dad tapped his glass. "I just want to say," he began, "that family isn't just who we're born to, it's who shows up. And Lindsay, she's shown us time and time again what it means to carry the legacy." A few polite claps. I stayed still. I'd heard that tone before, that slick, political cadence my father used when pretending kindness. He turned to the crowd again. "Which is why, as of this week, we've decided to restructure the Monroe Family Trust. Lindsay and Ethan will oversee the estate moving forward." The applause was real this time. Lindsay looked surprised, in that performative way that screams, "I rehearsed this, but pretend I didn't." I blinked. No mention of me. Not even a passing line. "And of course, to my other daughter, thank you for being here." Not a nod. Just empty air. I didn't cry. Didn't make a scene. I sat perfectly still, fork resting against my dessert, letting the sugar dissolve on my tongue as something colder bloomed in my chest. That's when Uncle Ray leaned toward me and whispered, "Come see me before you leave tonight. Your grandfather left you something, told me to keep it safe." I turned slowly. "Grandpa?" I said, barely a breath. Uncle Ray nodded once. "Something tells me you'll want to see it." My grandfather, Thomas Monroe, wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, people listened. He built our family's name from a tiny garage in Omaha into a multi-million-dollar agricultural tools empire. When he passed last spring, the funeral was swift, tidy, almost too polished. No long readings, no stories. Just handshakes and handouts. I remember standing near the casket, holding the program he designed himself. No frills, just black serif on thick ivory paper. No one asked me to speak. Lindsay had spoken, though. She'd cried on cue, mascara perfect, voice trembling as she told everyone how Grandpa used to take her fishing on Sunday mornings. Which was strange, because he and I had done that every Sunday from when I was 7 to 12. I remember asking Mom about it later. "Maybe you're misremembering," she said, slicing cucumbers without looking up. Just like the science fair in 8th grade, where I built a functioning water sensor system for drought detection, and they left before I got my award. "They were running behind," Mom had said flatly. Or the Christmas I gave Dad a hand-stitched photo album, and he gave it to Lindsay the next day, saying, "She's always loved things like this." I started making smaller gestures after that, and then, eventually, none at all. At school, I excelled, top of my class, scholarships, a degree in environmental engineering. I created things, fixed things, but somehow, nothing ever fixed that soft ache of being unseen. Lindsay, meanwhile, bounced from acting to creative consultancy to wedding planning. Each time she failed, they caught her like clockwork. Once, when I got accepted to a NASA internship, my mother said, "That's amazing, honey. But do you think you'll still have time to help with Lindsay's move next weekend?" And I went. I always went. Until I didn't. Until that rehearsal dinner, when silence became heavier than any scream I could have mustered. Later that night, I found Uncle Ray sitting on the back porch of the inn, lighting a cigar like it was 1982. "You came?" he said, handing me a small, padded envelope. Inside, a letter. My name on it, written in that spiky, upright cursive Grandpa always used. And a key, old brass with a green ribbon looped through the handle. I stared at it. "That's the key to the cabin," Ray said, exhaling smoke. "Tom told me, if they ever tried to erase you, you'd know. And if you didn't, this letter would." I opened it. Just 3 sentences. "If you're reading this, they've already rewritten you out. But I haven't. Find the green lockbox in the cabin attic. The truth's waiting." I folded it slowly. For the first time in a long time, I felt something stir. Not pain, not sadness. Direction. I left the inn without saying goodbye. Didn't tell Mom. Didn't text Lindsay. Didn't leave a note in the bridal suite guest book with my usual "so proud of you" scrawl. Instead, I drove. Out of the city, past the cornfields, beyond the late-night gas stations with flickering signs. The lake cabin had been abandoned for years. No one went there after Grandpa passed. It was too rustic, as Mom said. But I remembered every inch of it. The uneven porch step, the creaky back screen door, the row of faded fishing poles leaning against the wall like sleeping soldiers. The attic stairs groaned under my weight. It smelled like cedar and forgotten summers. Dust floated like memory in the air, heavy but slow. There, tucked behind a stack of old tax boxes and a plastic Christmas tree, sat a green lockbox. The ribbon had faded to olive, but the key slid in perfectly. Inside, a thick folder labeled Addendum, a flash drive, and another note. "Legacy isn't something you're given. It's something you prove you can carry. They said you were cold. You were quiet. You didn't beg to be loved. But I saw it all, Haley. Every quiet sacrifice. The water system. The way you cleaned up after Lindsay. The internship you gave up. You didn't ask to be seen, but I did see you. And I left a record." My hands shook. The folder was filled with notarized documents. A revised will dated 6 months before his death, naming me as heir to his personal holdings. Land deeds, patents, 40% of Monroe Agritech voting shares. I stared at the flash drive. Plugged it into my laptop, heart pounding. A video loaded. Grandpa, sitting in the lake house living room, sunlight on his shoulder. His voice was clear. "If you're watching this, kiddo, they probably didn't tell you about the updates. I made sure Ray would." He smiled softly. "I always knew they'd choose the loudest child, the neediest one, but I wanted someone steady, someone who built instead of broke." He leaned in. "You never made a scene, but you built every bridge." My throat tightened. "And that's the kind of person who should carry forward a name. Not because of the money, but because of what you'll do with it." The video cut off. I sat in the attic for hours, the folder on my lap, moonlight crawling through the dusty window. It wasn't anger I felt. It was confirmation. That the silence I'd endured wasn't emptiness. It was seen. Morning came before I realized I hadn't slept. The attic felt different now. Not lighter, exactly, but like the weight had shifted from my chest to the floor beneath me. I packed the folder and flash drive into my bag, took one last look at the green lockbox, and left it there. It had served its purpose. The drive back to the city was quiet. I didn't play music, just listened to the hum of the engine, my breath, the soft click of the turn signal as I pulled onto roads I knew by muscle memory. By the time I got back to the inn, it was noon. The brunch rehearsal was in full swing. Strings of pastel streamers fluttered from the pergola, and Lindsay stood in the middle of it all, laughing like she hadn't just watched her sister be erased. I stepped out of my car and walked straight across the gravel. Didn't stop to wave, didn't smile at the distant cousins. Just approached the officiant, Reverend Green, a family friend who once gave me my first Bible when I was 9. "Can I speak with you privately?" I asked. He looked startled. "Of course, Haley. Is everything all right?" I handed him the manila folder, careful not to draw attention. "My grandfather left this. He asked that it be read tonight, before the rehearsal dinner toasts." He opened his mouth, but I added, "Please. I'm not asking for a scene. Just his last words to be heard." His expression shifted. He nodded. That evening, the dinner began just as scripted. Soft jazz in the background, overpriced wine being poured into glasses that were never quite full. My parents gave another speech. Mom called Lindsay the most radiant bride this family's ever seen. Still no mention of me. Then Reverend Green cleared his throat and tapped a fork against his glass. I've been asked to read a final letter from Thomas Monroe, written before his passing. It concerns matters of family and legacy. I saw the ripple of confusion move through the crowd. Lindsay's smile faltered. Dad leaned forward as if about to interrupt, but Reverend Green began anyway. He read the note. The revised will. The letter about the lockbox. The explanation of the voting shares, the patents, the land. Gasps echoed like firecrackers across the courtyard. And with that, I leave these holdings to Haley Monroe, he finished, voice steady. Complete silence. I could hear the sound of a fork dropping to a plate. Then my mother's voice, quiet, shaking. That can't be right. Lindsay's hand gripped her wine glass like it was an anchor. And for the first time in my life, all eyes turned to me. Not with pity, not with confusion, but with the stunned awareness that I had been standing there all along, and none of them had truly looked. No one moved for a full 5 seconds. It was the kind of silence that doesn't last long, but feels like the air itself is deciding whether to collapse or combust. Then my father stood, red creeping into his cheeks, jaw tight. This wasn't agreed upon, he said to no one and everyone at once. It's legally notarized, Reverend Green replied quietly, closing the folder. And Tom made it clear, this was his final decision. Lindsay looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. She turned to Mom, who stared at me like I'd just punched her in the throat. I didn't flinch. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, hands folded in front of me, like I had at every one of Lindsay's school plays, every graduation party, every family photo where I was told to scoot over just a little more. Dad stepped toward me. You blindsided us. I met his eyes. Number you just never thought I mattered enough to prepare for. His nostrils flared. You think this is about fairness? No, I said, voice low. I think this is about finally being seen. Then Lindsay spoke, voice shaking, brittle. I built my entire future on this. I needed this. Why would Grandpa give it to you? I turned to her. Because I didn't expect it. She blinked, confused. I didn't build my life waiting for a handout. I built it trying to prove I could stand, even when no one stood for me. My mom looked away, staring down at her empty plate. That's when Aunt Margaret rose from her seat, a woman I hadn't seen speak more than 10 words at a gathering in years. Tom told me, she said, voice clear and unwavering. He told me he chose Haley because she didn't ask for power, but she carried responsibility anyway. He said legacy doesn't go to the loudest, it goes to the strongest. My mother's jaw tightened. But Haley's cold, she snapped. She never even asks how I am. And I felt something settle in me. You never left room for me to, I said. You filled every corner of the room with Lindsay. I didn't stop showing love. I stopped throwing it into a black hole. That was when my sister stood and walked away, heels clacking against stone, into the dark. She didn't look back. Neither did I. I didn't follow her. For once, I let Lindsay disappear without trying to understand her, without trying to comfort the storm she created. My mother stayed seated, fingers curled around her napkin like it was the only thing anchoring her. Dad rubbed his temple. He looked older than he had at the start of the night, like the truth had finally weighed down the version of himself he worked so hard to sell. I don't know what your grandfather was thinking, he muttered. I tilted my head. I do, he scoffed. Don't flatter yourself. But I wasn't flattered. I was just clear. He saw what none of you did. The time I built a prototype for the community irrigation project, and you said I was wasting time. When I skipped my college graduation to drive Lindsay across the state because she lost her license. Every time I stood quietly in the wings while you celebrated her broken promises like triumphs. He didn't interrupt. And you thought I stayed quiet because I had nothing to say? I continued. But I stayed quiet because it was the only way you'd let me stay. His lips parted slightly, maybe to defend himself, maybe to apologize. But nothing came out. That was when Reverend Green, still holding the folder, stepped forward. "There's more," he said. Mom snapped her head toward him. "What do you mean, more?" He pulled out a small, handwritten page, aged at the edges. Another letter. He cleared his throat. This was to be read only if the family questioned his choice. Then he began. "If they're pushing back, let them. I chose Haley because she builds where others burn, because she never asked for applause. She asked for space, and because she has never once turned her back on this family, even when they turned their backs on her. She doesn't need to win. She already has. I didn't leave her this because she needed it. I left it because she earned it when no one was watching." Reverend Green folded the page slowly, and just like that, it was done. No more debates, no more what-ifs. The truth, undeniable and simple, had been spoken, and it echoed louder than any toast ever could. I didn't smile, didn't cry, just breathed. For the first time in my life, the air didn't feel borrowed. It felt mine. After the reading, the night dissolved like sugar in hot tea. Too fast, too quiet. People murmured. Some guests slipped out early, awkwardly patting shoulders, pretending to check phones. Others lingered, pretending to be interested in the dessert table. But no one said a word to me. No hugs, no congratulations. Just silence. The kind that comes after an earthquake, when everyone's checking to see what cracked beneath their feet. Lindsay didn't return. Dad retreated into a corner, whispering into his phone. Mom paced the perimeter of the courtyard, her heels leaving faint divots in the grass. Eventually, she stopped in front of me. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something sincere. But instead, she whispered, "You could have handled this privately." I blinked slowly. "I tried," I said. "You just never noticed." She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a flicker of a second, I saw something almost human behind her controlled expression. But it vanished just as quickly. "I don't think I can forgive you for embarrassing us," she said, and I finally realized. She never thought about what they'd done to me, only how it looked when the mask cracked. "You don't have to," I replied softly. "Forgiveness isn't a requirement, it's a gift, and I've stopped giving them out to people who don't say thank you." I turned before she could reply. Behind me, Aunt Margaret gave me the slightest nod. Uncle Ray, standing by the gate, raised his glass. "It was enough. The rest of them?" They faded into the background noise, the clinking of cutlery, the low hum of the generators behind the stage, the weight of a legacy shifting from the loudest to the one who had endured the longest. That night, I packed my suitcase in silence. No one stopped me. No one knocked. And I didn't wait for anyone to. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I checked out before sunrise. No goodbye notes, no forwarding address, just the quiet squeak of a luggage wheel across tile and the low hum of freedom. Outside, the sky was soft with lavender light, the kind of stillness you don't notice unless you've just let go of something that's been crushing your ribs for years. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel powerful. I felt clean, and that was new. There were no dramatic family texts that day. No flurry of apologies. Just a single message from Lindsay that read, "You really think you're better than us now?" I deleted it. Not out of spite, out of peace. Because I didn't need to carry her voice anymore. It had lived rent-free in my spine long enough. I didn't respond to Mom's late night, "We need to talk" voicemail. Didn't return Dad's missed call. I wasn't mad. I was done. There's a difference. When you're mad, you still want something. Recognition, apology, justice. But when you're done, you stop needing. And I had reached that point like a slow tide creeping past its usual mark. I rented a studio on the edge of the city. Sunlight in the mornings, silence at night. I changed my emergency contact to my godmother. Removed every Monroe from my phone except for Uncle Ray. For the first time, I lived a life that didn't require explaining. I didn't hold space for people who only showed up when I had something to give. And strangely, the world didn't fall apart. It got quieter. And then, slowly, fuller. I didn't touch the inheritance for weeks. Not because I was afraid to, but because I wanted to know who I was without it. Then, one Sunday morning, sitting by the window with a chipped mug of coffee and a notebook I hadn't opened since college, I made a decision. I called a woman I'd once met at a local education summit, Gloria. She ran a program for under-resourced high school students interested in engineering but lacking tools, mentors, or even belief. I asked her what she'd do if someone gave her the money to expand. She laughed, then paused. "I'd build a center," she said. "Something quiet, strong, not flashy, just real." 2 weeks later, I wired the funds to start it. We named it the Quiet Lab. Not after me, but after all the kids who'd sat in the back of the room, who never raised their hands because no one ever called on them. We found a space, a worn-down library in a quiet neighborhood, with good bones and soft light. I hung a small photo on the entrance wall. Me and Grandpa, sitting at the cabin dock, fishing poles in hand. He's looking out at the water. I'm looking at him. Next to it, my 8th grade science fair journal. The one no one asked about? The one with water saves scribbled in glitter pen. Legacy isn't always glass plaques or company shares. Sometimes, it's the soft thud of a book being opened by a kid who finally believes they're allowed to try. One afternoon, a student asked why I started the center. I thought about it. Then I smiled and said, "Because someone saw me when no one else did, and now I want to pass that on." And I meant it. It's been 9 months since the wedding rehearsal. 9 months since the will. Since the silence. Since I stopped trying to earn space at a table that was never built for me. Some days still ache, like phantom pains in limbs I never knew were missing. An old habit of hoping for a text, a birthday call, a check-in that never comes. But most days feel like morning. I wake up to light drifting across wooden floors, to the low hum of kids laughing in the quiet lab, to coffee that tastes like purpose. The cabin has become my weekend retreat. I keep the windows open, let the breeze carry in the scent of pine and memory. Sometimes I sit on the same dock from that photo, feet dangling over the edge, notebook in hand. Not to plan, just to exist. I don't need revenge. I don't crave recognition. I don't even wish they'd come back anymore. Because I didn't just lose a family. I found myself. And in that space, that quiet, I built something louder than applause. Peace. I end this story where it began. Not with a speech, not with a scream. Just with a stillness that says, I made it through. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered whether being kind is worth it, whether being silent means you'll be forgotten, remember this. He didn't leave me money. He left me space to be. This story isn't about revenge. It's about rediscovery. About breaking free from the roles we're assigned and choosing instead who we want to become. It reminds us that being unseen doesn't make us unworthy. And sometimes, being cut off is the very beginning of being set free. See you again.